of Malav Malka. The reason why I started off with the topic of Malav Malka is because this was actually, the Rebbe was addressing a group that was in charge of making Malav Malkas in New Haven. So New Haven, Connecticut. So therefore, the Rebbe is going to talk about Malav Malka and he's going to connect it with the Parshat HaShavua. Sudas Malav Malka, Mahava Kesher Mavar, Shal Shabbos Al Yimois HaChoil. Pirush Malav Malka hu Harei Livui HaMalka Shabbos. What does it mean, Malav Malka? Shabbat is called the queen, and we are escorting her after Shabbat. So therefore, even after Shabbat, even though it's Motzei Shabbat, on the one hand, it's taking place after Shabbos, and it has to do with the following week. But on the other hand, it's still connected to Shabbos because he's saying it's a Sudas Malav Malka. Shabbos zu Koranu Parshas Bahar Oisa Maschila Torah Betzivui Shal Mitzvah Shemitah, and the pasuk says B'Shnas Hashvis B'Shana Hashvis Tishbais Ha'aretz Shabbos LaHashem. What is the meaning of that? Koloimar Hashana Hashvis Hi Keshabbos Kfi Sherashi Madgish Shabbos Hashem Kishem Shenamar B'Shabbos Bereishis. In the expression of Chazal, when it uses the term Shabbos Bereishis, that means what we call the seventh day of the week, what we call in English Saturday. Shabbos, that we call normally Shabbos, in Chazal, when they're trying to emphasize that it's Shabbos day of the week, they call it Shabbos Bereishis. So Rashi explains that when it says in the pasuk that the Oretz will be a Shabbos LaHashem, in other words, it's a similar idea to what we say by Shabbos Bereishis concerning the seventh day of the week. It's not just, okay, there is an Isur to do work on the seventh year and whatever, and you figure out what to do with yourself. No. The entire concept of the seventh year is like Shabbos is in the rest of the week. It's a matter of a specific holiness. In truth is, by a Jewish person, it's not just Shabbos and Shemitah that's holy. Everything is holy. 6 days of the week. 6 years before the Shemitah are holy. B'chol yoim gal sheyimei ha'choil mispalalim olachat tefillah loim dem Gemara and Mishnayis and Yaakov Chumash Shir Kol Shal Torah. There's an obligation after you daven in the morning to learn something, to study something, to such a degree it's even put into the Nusach HaTefillah at the end of davening. This is the reason why we say about Pitum HaKtoros and so on. It's because to be yotza at least somewhat of a shir in Torah study at the end of davening. So you could think that that's it. My holiness is stopped. No. If you're a businessman, you have to not step on someone else's business. To be faithful, they learned out from Yaakov, that even though Lavan was the whole time tricking him and trying to take advantage of him, so Yaakov could have said to himself, listen, he's anyway tricking me, he's anyway taking advantage of me, he tricked me and he had me work for Rachel another time after I worked for Leah, so maybe I shouldn't go ahead and serve him honestly. So we say no, that there's an obligation, and we learn out from Yaakov Avinu how honest you have to be in working if you're an employee, even if your employer doesn't treat you right. So therefore, we have this holiness every day of the week, throughout the day, and every year, and throughout the year. Aval Yehudim nidroshim leisalos. Olaficha kishmagia hayom hashvi ala Yehudi lekatshi yoiser masher hakdusha sheyimei sachoil yimei achoil. V'chein kishmagia shana hashviis v'shav sahar Shabbos LaHashem ein al Yehudi lavoi oz v'maga im dvarim artzim v'tarbus chumris. You have to remove yourself from these things. You have to remove yourselves from things connected with the earth. Again, it's not a vacation. It's not a time to make a tour of the world when people get off for Shemitah. It's a time to devote ourselves to more holy endeavors. So seemingly, what does this have to do with us? של מצווה שמיטה, שבשנה השביעית יש להסמסר יויסר לעניין הקדושה קיימים גם בחוץ לארץ. There's the message applies everywhere. Torah is nitzchi, it's everlasting, and Torah applies in every place. And even in a place where we can't physically observe the halachas of Shemitah, the message of Shemitah, the idea of devoting a certain amount of our time to holy things, that message applies even in Chutz La'aretz. They say, "Shekein admas Chutz La'aretz ein Kedusha amnam ka'admas Eretz Yisrael," and therefore there's no obligation to let my property rest if it's outside of Eretz Yisrael. Still in all, but the Jew is holy. The land may not be holy, but the Jew still is holy. So therefore he has an obligation to go up higher. When the Rebbe said the Sikha originally in Tafshin Yud Tes, it was a Shemitah year. So the Rebbe was saying, now that we're in a Shemitah year, even though the Rebbe was talking in Chutz La'aretz, the Rebbe was in New York and he was talking to people from New Haven, so there's no halachas of Shemitah in the legal thing, because Chutz La'aretz, but the idea of Shemitah applies, that we need to elevate and rise up higher. Base. Yeshem ke'elu she'einam roitzim la'niach sha'atoira nailas ma'asech. The entire idea that Torah is super rational, they don't want to allow for that. They try to always dismiss it and give some mundane or material reasons for mitzvahs in the Torah. So, when it comes to Shemitah, they have a whole idea about Shemitah. And they say, ומשום כך ציווה התורה להעביר את האדם 11 שנים. Why? כדי שתתחזק שוב ותוציא פרי רב. So it's an agricultural benefit that Hashem told us, you know what, you want to make sure, since everything is based on the agriculture of the land, you want to make sure there's enough energy, there's enough minerals in the land. If you use it up too much, you're not going to be able to grow anything, so you have to give it a year rest after 6 years work. So it should be revitalized, so it should come back to be able to give full force. L'chein toinim heim, ein b'tkufeseinu lizakik l'shmita, kivin shesh pisaron acher, lashbiach sadoma, did shonim tovim, l'sugeim. There are many other ways that we can physically improve the land. So in those days, in the times of the Torah, you needed to let the land rest. But nowadays, we have fertilizer, we have this, we have that, we have chemicals, whatever it is, to improve the land, so we don't have to have Shemitah. Beram, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hizer Meroish V'Amar, V'tzivisi es birchasi lachem b'shana hashishis, v'asas hatvua l'shalosh hashanim. In this week's parsha, it talks about not just Shemitah, but it talks about Yovel as well. Yovel means, after you have 7 cycles, so at the end of the 7th cycle, you're going to have the 7 times 7 is 49, so you're going to have the 50th year. The 50th year, you also don't have what to eat. So it comes out that you have the 6th year, that the crops, the 6th year, have to work for the 6th and the 7th, the year that's Shemitah, and the 8th year, which is the 50th year. So it's going to be completely miraculous, and Hashem says, I will command my bracha, I will give a bracha that the 6th year will have enough to be able to give the tevuah for all the necessary years. HaKadosh Baruch Hu noisim berchas b'adama b'shana hashishis, very important point. Shetoitzi b'shana zu tevuah l'shal shanim l'shishis l'shviyis l'shminis. So the Rebbe says, if the whole idea of Shemitah was just because of the natural state of the earth, that the earth becomes depleted and weak, So how could it be that on the 6th year, when it's the worst situation, it's going to give out enough produce for 3 years? אילו היה גורם משמיטה טבעי, כדי שלא יתחל שאדם מן העיבוד, הייסה אז הברכה צריכה להיות לא בשנה השישית, כאשר האדם החלש ביותר, כי אם בשנה הקודמת, then would make more sense that it would be able to give more. How could it be that the last year, when it's already like completely depleted, that's when it's going to give out 3 years worth of crops? כאן הוכחה ברורה, שכאשר יש לאדם ביטחון בהשם, והוא מצהיר לא נזרע, we will not plant. That's what it says in the Torah. We say, the person says, we didn't plant. Hu mekayim esivi Hashem. Noisen HaKadosh Baruch Hu's berchasei. When I do my part, so Hashem gives his bracha. Shebeshosh ha'adam chalosh b'yoser. It's the 6th year. He might see a tvoah pisholish mashar b'shana matzlachs b'yoser va'afilu mashar b'shana rishayna. In the 1st year, it's only going to have enough for 1 year, but in the 6th year, it's going to have enough for 3 years, which makes no sense whatsoever. But because a yid serves Hashem, he gets this. We also will see in Chutz La'aretz the command of Hashem's bracha, that Hashem will give us things and help us with brachas, which in the physical world doesn't make any sense. He makes a simple calculation. How can I compete with people that don't keep Torah mitzvahs? It makes no sense. Harei olayli ispalel, first of all. I can't run into work right as soon as I get up. I have to daven. And then we said after davening, he can't also stop. He has to be lilmoid. Then lost its tzedakah. He has to give money to tzedakah. Lachs yeshivas, about medrashes. Keitzad eifoi uchol ischaresim lo Yehudi she'einu mispal einu loimed einu noisen tzedakah ula latzeya. It's impossible. We always bring proofs from the fact of the survival of Jewish people throughout the centuries. But just look at it, economic survival. Just economic survival, how is it possible? We have so much more obligations monetarily. We have so much less time to work. And still in all, we survive, and not only do we survive, but we defeat our competition. This is the lesson, and this is the command of Shemitah. That we're not talking about. We're not talking about that Hashem is going to reward him in Gan Eden when Mashiach comes. We're talking about here and now. That it says in our parshas, talking about physical tvuah, food on the table. So now the Rebbe is going to connect this back to what he started saying about Malava Malcha, because Shabbos is the same idea. כשמגיע מצוי השבס, לאחר שעברו 24 שעות, בהן לא ינעשו כל העסקים. Now you have to go back into the world. How are you going to compete with someone that kept the store open the entire Shabbos? So logically, it makes no sense that when Matzah Shabbos comes, the person is going to feel down. He's going to feel upset. He's going to feel, I sacrificed for Hashem. Now what's going to happen with my business? There's a story there's a book called All for the Boss about that describes the very difficult situation that Shomer Shabbos Yidden had when in America in the 20s and the 1930s, he used to take a job on Monday. He didn't tell them that he's Shomer Shabbos. On Friday, he used to tell them that he's Shomer Shabbos. They used to give him a check and say, "Don't come back." Yeah. And then on Sunday, he used to go looking through the classifieds, and then Monday, all over again, he started. The point is, it comes Matzah Shabbos, he thinks to himself, what am I going to do? How am I going to compete? I just lost an entire day of business. No, now we went to Shabbos. Before, we were talking about Chakleim. We were talking about Shemitah. So, any type of business.
The fact that in those generations that we're talking about, they have only land.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that was then. But nowadays,
think about they,
we still have the things. You see how hard it is for many people to say, I'm going to close my business on Shabbos. I cater, let's say, to the tourist industry in Florida. Yeah. And the tourists are coming here to the boardwalk on Shabbos.
Real estate.
Whatever. Shabbos, you show around real estate, right? So I'm not saying you. I mean, people show around real estate. So I'm losing the opportunity to show a property. Okay, Baruch Hashem, you don't have this Nisayan, but other Jews, you speak to them, you tell them, ask them about closing their business on Shabbos. You say, Shabbos? What do you mean? How can I go to Shabbos? It's impossible. One
of my competition in Israel, we have this discussion about, you just mentioned some things about a Jew that has a competition with Shomer Mitzvot, no Shomer Mitzvot, Shomer Shabbat, no Shomer. And once I was talking to him and I told him, how are you making those big numbers and so? Say, when you are praying and going shul and going holidays and clothes, I'm working. And he's a Kohen.
My friend also from England, also a Kohen, and he became Dati. And he spoke to his father to close his shop on Shabbos. That's when all the business is done on Shabbos. Everything, But so eventually his father agreed. He said, "All right." He said, "I'll do it." Mamish, he made on the rest of the week. He made more than what he would make for a Shabbos when he was open. He said he saw it like his father saw it. And says, "I can't believe it." He thought he was going to lose out, but he started closing the shop and he started making more during the week than he made when he was open.
Amazing. So, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it comes Matzah Shabbos, there's a minhag by many Jews that when it comes Matzah Shabbos, they say, Al Tira Avdi Yaakov. What's the meaning of that? Im Rak Avdi Atom. So then, Ein Lecha Lachshosh Ki Ani Edag Lecha. So why does he have to be told Al Tira? Because he's scared. Now comes the week. How am I going to make up the loss of Shabbos? So Hashem tells him, you're Avdi, right? You're doing what I asked you to do. You're an Eved to me. Don't worry. And then he brings in another thing that we have in this week's parsha, which is about an Eved. That if a person has an Eved, different types of halachas, and one of the halachas of an Eved he's going to bring is that the master is responsible to take care of the Eved. Even the children of the Eved they have to take care of.
Do you know, Rabbi, that Eved, even a Jew Eved, allowed to marry a non-Jew?
It's not marriage.
No marriage.
It's procreation. Yeah. You know that. But there's also certain tnoim. If he's a ravak, he can't do so. It can only be in addition to his wife. There's a lot of limitations to that. That's the responsibility of the Adain for this Eved. Eved, his responsibility is chayav l'aseh avodah matal sol avodah Adam. On the other hand, the Adain, the master, has his responsibility. Va'adam yisapek le'parnasaseh. So the same relationship. We always say that mashu hu mitzav Yisrael lasis hu oisim. Whatever Hashem commands the Jewish people to do, He Himself does. Since He tells us that someone that owns a slave or a servant has to supply the servant's needs, so the same thing, we are considered servants of Hashem. So Hashem must supply our needs. Kach am b'Yisrael k'sha'adam chinas avdi yankei v'oiser tzayna kadosh baruch hu mesapek la Hashem es kol tzorokav hein beruchnis v'hein begashmis. Amor b'alidei hadgasha kishe Yehudi miskayim misasrim l'kayim sudas malav malka b'simcha. Avar yoim boy loy hoysa kol achnasa. There was no income today. It's Shabbos and no income. What are you doing celebrating? Why are you having a meal? You should be crying. No income came in. Va'adrab, not only did no income come in, but Shabbos, there's more expenses than the rest of the week. You got an aliyah, you got to give some money for it. That's another expense, in addition to the expense of the Shabbos meals and so on. Another expense. What's the significance of that? That the darkness of the world, a Jew's capabilities to illuminate it. And the Super Medrash, what happened was, when Adam Rishon was created, it was Friday. L'chvoid Shabbos, the sun did not go down on Friday night. So the sun shone for 36 hours from Friday morning, when Adam Rishon was created, until Motzei Shabbos. All of a sudden, Motzei Shabbos came along, it was dark. So this is the first time that Adam Rishon saw darkness. What's he going to do? Hichnis la'akadosh baruch hu rayin l'kacha shnei avonim u'l'shaf sham zeh b'zeh v'litzar oir. Ozra, the message of this is shebekoyach shel adam litzar oir gam kishashoyer chayshach avnei tevel. And it's a very important message that I've been saying over here. A lot of times we think to ourselves and say, who am I to bring light? I'm only one person. Let the leaders, let the heads of communities, let the Rosh Hashivas and the Rabbanim know. Every person can illuminate. Every person can bring light. After Abdallah ba'imroi b'chosh ve'altira avdi Yankiv mitech emunah v'acharkach mitech b'meshech hashvuah mitech ivachos. He actually sees it with his own experience, like Abba described. Shakadosh Baruch Hu mesapek le parnasasei b'mamen lefi pshutam shel dvarim v'yiker sha'mamen moitzel dvarim smeichim v'toivim. It's brought down that a person never loses from Shabbos, and the same money that he was going to make over the 6 days, he's not going to make anything more with Shabbos. Sometimes, I think the previous Rebbe was the one that said it, sometimes it could look, if you look at the bank account, that there's more money there, but it ends up being spent on things that are you'd rather not spend. You'd rather not have the money and rather not spend, on medical bills, chas v'shalom, or things like that. So therefore, you can't always, like the expression, I think in Yiddish, chappen the Mebishten beim Bord or beim Nose. You can't always say, give a look, I worked on Shabbos and I had, X amount of dollars more. Don't start up. You never know what those dollars are going to have to be used for. So that's what he says, that the Eibishter makes sure that he has money and that the money is used for good things. And then the Rebbe concludes with a bracha to the committee that's involved in Slav Malka and Ohaven. Yitin Hashem shtarchiv was pilus hamav lalka b'simcha v'tuv leva v'yitin hatzlacha b'avidaschem b'chlal v'cholech b'frat. In other words, both the klal and also each individual. Shetchazku v'tagdilu es kol in yonam atoivim b'Newhaven mebli l'shkoyach es moistis Lubavitch b'makim v'asher b'kara b'yoyser yeveleinu ha-Mashiach la'aretz HaKadosh b'brius u'b'simcha v'meiri amenu. The Rebbe in the footnote brings down that Mashiach has specially to do with the Malav Malka. It's called Sudas David Malka Mashiach. And also it says that the Tchias HaMesim will be rebuilt from a bone that's called luz. And the bone that's called luz is sustained by only one type of food, the food that we eat by Malav Malka. So therefore Malav Malka has a special connection with Mashiach. Not Masr not Drisha Sham Chol Yehudim b'Newhaven v'dagu shemisper gadol kechol hayoser shel Yehudim ishtatvu b'sudas Malav Malka v'shagam l'didam yeh al tira avdi Yankiv yitn lahem Hashem aparnosa rabba beruchnis begashmis.
Even though that Malav Malka is the toughest Seudah.
Yes.
Especially in the summertime.
That's right. It's very late at night.
It takes almost Shabbat, and then you just eat and you have to eat again.
Right.
So
that's why you have the etzem luz. You got to be like the strong bone that rises up at Tchias HaMesim. So here's another sikha connected with the parsha that's printed together with this sikha, also having to do with the lessons of Shemitah, which is in general the similar idea to what we were speaking about before. Duber kama pomim rabbis ki ha'uvda sha'atoyra nikras b'shem Torah ba lohoyres al toichna shi mishameshes hayras derech lebnei Yisrael ketzad lisnaig b'chai yom yom. That's what it means, Torah. It shows you, it directs you. The parsha sheb'Torah shuchla yom b'kriyasam ha-mitzvah rishayni hi HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzavas b'nei Yisrael b'tzeisam Mitzrayim shekishi konsul Eretz Yisrael v'yavdu es admas HaKodesh. Eretz Yisrael's land is Admas Kodesh, Aleim la'abed oisa sheish shanim, v'ilu b'shana hashvi'is, v'shavsar Shabbos l'Hashem. That's the mitzvah. But the way it says it in the Torah is the opposite. Ela shaseder because of hapoch tchila namar atzivui v'shavsar Shabbos l'Hashem. Ki shavoyu al haaretz v'shavsar Shabbos l'Hashem. V'rak la'acher mekein namar sheishon tizor sadecha v'goymer. Which doesn't really make any sense. Why would even start with the end? What happens after the 6 years? First there has to be the 6 years, and only after the 6 years are you going to have the 7th year. So he should have said 6 years you should work the land, and then also by Shabbos we have it says Sheishes Yamim Tasam Lachtecha V'Yom HaShvi Tishbois. That's how it says by Shabbos. Why doesn't he do the same thing over here by Shemitah? Because there's a special lesson. Haseder Shebetoira Afhu Toira Hira. From Torah from the order in Torah we learn out things as well. It says that Ein Mugdam U'Ma'ucher B'Torah. The Torah will a lot of times write things out of order. In other words, certain events in the Torah will be written not in the order that they occurred. Why would Hashem write something out of order? Obviously, the message that there is by putting this event next to that event is more important than keeping it in the chronological, historical order of when it occurred. So we see from this that the order in Torah is also a teaching. And a lot of times, Rashi will ask, why does this event say next to this event? It didn't really happen there, it happened later, whatever. That's the beginning of this week's Parsha. So the same thing, the fact that this week's Parsha, he says it out of order. First he starts off with the mitzvah of Shemitah, then he says what happens before you keep Shemitah the 6 years, that itself has a message as well. We learn out from the Shemitah also concerning the 7th day of the week, which is Shabbos. Mashpiyim v'noisnim koyach b'sheish shenois ha'avoida ha'koidmois b'sheishes yemei ha'avoida ha'koidmim. We think we have no effect on the past. Torah tells us that the present and the future have a capability to improve and influence even the past. And that's why it begins with the 7th year of Shemitah. The year of Shemitah influences the 6 years that preceded it. The day of Shabbos influences and gives energy and vitality to the 6 days prior to it. Yesh b'kach gam tshuva l'kach sheyeshnam lo Yehudim v'gam el Yehudim hashoylim eich efsher lavid shei shonim v'shisha yomim u'lisnaig al pi ha-Torah. How can you even follow Torah's directives for those 6 days and those 6 years? B'shor sh'asviva lo Yehudis chazak v'yeseda b'harbe. The environment is so much stronger around us that's not Torah observant. How can I make sure to run my Torah, my business very ethically? How can I make sure to do things according to Torah when everybody else around me is not acting that way? ובפרט לאחר שבני ישראל מצווים להסנהג בכל עניונים לפי ההירוס וההגבלה של התורה שאינן קיימות לגבי לא יהודים. It's similar to what we asked before about if I take off 1 day a week from work, how is it possible for me to compete? But here he says even before that, even the 6 days of the week and even the 6 years, how is it possible for me to compete when everybody else doesn't have the limitations and the constrictions that a Jew has in business and his involvement with the world? Sheishes hayomim v'sheish hashonim maschilim b'machshava shel Shabbos l'Hashem yom shel Shabbos v'shana shel Shabbos yom kadosh v'shana kadosha v'hakdusha neisenes koyach u'mashpia al yemei v'shnois ha'avoidam shetia afsharus l'isnaig behem k'vi she'atorah dereshes v'dafkai dezel latzliach. I am focused right away at the beginning of the parsha v'shav sa'ar Shabbos l'Hashem. That focus on v'shav sa'ar Shabbos l'Hashem is something that gives me the strength that when I'm working on Sunday, I'm working on Monday, I'm working on the first year of the Shemitah, the second year of the Shemitah, I should be able to do it as a Jew, despite the fact that there's the environment around me that's not keeping to the standards that Yiddishkeit demands. Vav, mashmos hamukiyos l'davar ha'Torah meres she'ein bebnei Yisrael chuli. This is similar to what we said before, that by a Jew, it's not just that the 7th year is a holy year and Shabbos is a holy day, but Yisrael are holy every day of the week, except that Shabbos and Shemitah, it's a higher level of holiness. So he says, Noitlim heim min ha-Shabbos yeshal Shabbos, el sheishes hayom v'sheish hashonim. But it's just the difference, the degree. That's during the 6 days or the 6 years. When you get to the Shemitah year, or you get to Shabbos. That's not the only place where we see the distinction. Kedusha. Kol masechel l'shem shamayim. Kol ashter oisel lech l'kasher ma'kadosh baruch hu. I'm eating, I'm drinking, I'm exercising, I'm sleeping, whatever it is. I'm working. All of these things, even things that are not directly connected with Torah mitzvahs, has to be imbued with the awareness that I'm doing it for Hashem's sake. V'zu ha'ashpa'ah ha'kfula sheyom Shabbos. Yom shekulish Kedusha Shabbos kodesh v'kasher ma'kadosh baruch hu Shabbos l'Hashem. Al sheishes yemei avoda shetia behem ha'efsharus lihismoided im hasviva ulatzliach gam begashmis leroimem es yemei avoda shiyu kedoshim afhem. Now, this was, I believe, it doesn't say this on the bottom, but I think this was before Shavuos, was one of the times when the Rebbe used to address the women. He used to address the women before Rosh Hashanah and before Shavuos. So this was a sikh where the Rebbe addressed the women before Shavuos. Maybe it was also he used to address like the graduating class of the girls' school. I don't remember. So this sikh was actually, I think, addressed to the women, as we'll see from the way he says he addresses you. The women are such and such. The first thing that brings Shabbos into the home, before the husband makes kiddush, is hadlok sneirus. Darv ze koydem l'kabal Shabbos or l'kiddush. Hadavar harishon sheboy maskol Shabbosum laha'ir es habayis ha'Yehudi. Similar to what we spoke about before, that when it comes Matzah Shabbos, he's madlik aner to illuminate the darkness. But going into Shabbos, we have to illuminate the Jewish home. U'mitzvah zu hi achas ha'mitzvah Hashem oimer l'gabeim shu noisnem b'rosh v'reshoyno l'noshim aleim lahoyer sabayis ha'Yehudi u'be'emtzo'usam through the women ba ha'oira l'chal ha'mishpacha l'baal l'yolodim l'achim. All of them are dependent upon the woman. The woman is the one that brings them the light. Hatam l'kach shemitzvah zu nitenes l'noshim oimer ad morazokin u'mishum she'isha nimtzas b'marbes ha'dvam b'bayis u'metapelos b'tzorchi ha'bayis, like we're going to learn also in today's Chumash, that's Safta Bebeisa, Sima Bebeisa. When an older lady is at home, Rashi says in tomorrow's Chumash, so then it brings a bracha into the home. Lafia Amr Le'il, Shabbos Chayavis Lashpia Mashpia Al Kol Yemei HaShavua, Hare Adover Nochen Gam B'Yachas L'Reishis HaShabbos Ladlok Saneres. The lighting of the candle influences the rest of the week. Yesh koyach biyad neshe Yisrael lahoyer ba'or Yehudi asabayis l'chol mishpacha u'min haShabbos lakachas v'lahamshich ha'oyer l'chol shavua. Not just that the home on Shabbos should be illuminated. Namar b'zoyar ki ala isha lahadlik neiris b'simcha levavis u'beregish. It's very interesting because, again, another similarity between this and the previous sikha. The Rebbe spoke about that by Mlava Malka, the Jew does the Mlava Malka with simcha, with joy. And the same thing over here, when he's talking about Neiris Shabbos, he says that the Zohar says the importance of lighting Shabbos candles with joy and with warmth and feeling. Kach gam l'gaba toichna p'nim mishal mitzvah, ha'aretz habayis richa le'yoses kein va'oire hismecha or simcha levavis umaleis regesh. She has to illuminate it with warmth and with joy. בכל הדברים שרבנו החוכם על שם טוב אדמו"ר הזקן ועד כה תספר חמי אדמו"ר דרשו היו רוצים שהחסידים גם האנשים וגם הנשים יוירו את הדרך לכל ישראל. So this is something not just for the women that are here by this convention or whatever it is. So Yivarech Hashem is kulchem that addresses the women. Vas kol achas mikein b'miyuchad shetoiru as haderech l'chol nishei Yisrael. Keitzel lahoyres habayis ha-Yehudi b'simcha lavavis u'beregesh lahoyres yom ha-Shabbos u'akachas mimenu gam liyimei ha-choil lasis gam oisem kedoshim b'simcha v'tuv Yitan Hashem sheyav Mashiach b'mehero v'toch chidei ibud admas Yisrael b'Eretz HaKodesh nekayim b'vlo hamido es mitzvahs ha-Shabbos v'gam es mitzvahs Shabbos ha-shonim shnas ha-Shemitah.